a lot of people who are interested in woodwork these days. I think I've been trained largely by YouTube, and the great thing about that is, of course, is that it gives you access to a wider range of teachers than you could ever feasibly imagine before YouTube was around. But for me, and I suspect like many others, the inspiration that it gives doesn't necessarily always end up as completed projects. So something I wanted to illustrate to point a lot of this out actually was the ability or my inclination to support people on YouTube, the other creators out there. A lot of the way in which they make some of their income is by selling plans, and to illustrate the inspiration not necessarily always equaling completion, or never in this case, I just sort of have collected some plans here. You'll recognise pretty much all of the names, of course. You've got Make Something Duresta plans. We've got Samurai Carpenter. I'm pretty sure, well, I know there's plenty of Rex Kruger in here. The names amongst names when it comes to this type of thing. And apart from the workbench that I'm filming on, which was one of Rex Kruger's plans, this was one that I actually did make and complete. There's plenty of stuff in here that has gone from the inspiration stage to the printer, but hasn't managed to get an awful lot further than there. So whilst I have the plans and an extensive collection of t-shirts, what I'd like to do is actually create a little bit more, rather than sharpening tools that I've collected and turning various bits of lumber into wood shavings. I actually want to work my way through this pile and see how we go from there. And I'd like to create a film log just to see how I progress, and really just to compare my experiences of making these plans, particularly following along with some of the amazing experts that are out there actually sharing their time on it. So this is something that's also benefited from the fact that I've got a little bit of time available at the moment, and have upgraded a few of my tools and actually bought a couple of new ones. So it will certainly mean that I will have all of the gear and no idea, but again, hopefully we'll improve on that in the coming weeks. The main thing, I think, as I say, is just really to get some stuff finished and build the skills that go along with it. But before I get onto that, I've got to finish up one thing that has been sat taunting me on my bench for some months now that needs to be wrapped up, and then we can start into this pile of plans. As you can see here, I've got the sides of the box already done. So I've done this up as a dovetail box using, as it says there, camphor laurel, which has been used for the sides. And I've got some reclaimed maple, which I'm going to be using for the top and bottom of the box. So now it's just a matter of basically just cutting off the rough end and then marking out loosely a couple of pieces which will knock over on the miter saw there to get them roughly square. To get them within the range of what I'm looking for the top and bottom, I'm actually just going to plane off a couple of edges there. So I'm just marking that out with the marking gauge, and then just rubbing a straight pencil line down there just so I can see when it's time to stop planing. And that's easier, I think, rather than trying to actually do it on the bandsaw or on the miter saw to get the edge off. So planing also just gives that really nice finish. Something also that I had really thought just couldn't be effective is the use of wax, or some people use oil, on the sole of your plane. I had always just figured completely incorrectly that, you know, the first time you rub it over the timber it's just going to rub straight off, but it actually makes an amazing difference. And this is an Australian brand that I use. They make a product which is for basically for planes, but also for protecting things like cast iron surfaces on bandsaws, table saw tables, etc. So that type of thing is actually amazingly effective. This here is the just a number 5 jack plane, and I'm really working on getting into the habit of checking how square I am. I don't know how common this is. I tend to plane with a slight left tilt, so I always get a bit of an angle off to the left on the surfaces that I'm trying to work through, but I use the square more and more and try and address that as I plane more and more often. One of the things I've found really difficult with box making is not, and this is by far not a perfect dovetail box by any stretch, as you can see, but kind of getting the lid and the base set. And so this has been a recent purchase of mine, my new bandsaw, and what that's enabling me to do is do a resaw here, so I can actually just halve the width of the depth of the timber. But unfortunately, and this, I've had really good luck so far, and bandsawing is fairly new to me. This one got away from me a bit, where the wood actually really wandered away from the fence, and as you can see here, it's got a bit of a hump in it. So rather than starting a new piece of wood or something like that, I just decided to put it in the vise and flatten it out that way. And it was quite serendipitous actually, because it enabled me to get a much thinner piece for the lid than I had originally intended. And that's actually sort of one of the things that I've been happiest with, and I think that's where the bandsaw is going to make quite a difference for me in future, is being able to make much thinner pieces of timber. I mean, previously I could always saw it by hand and plane, but it's always quite difficult to try and do a resawing by hand, or at least at my skill level it certainly is. But now with the bandsaw you can get much finer timbers, which I think is going to help the sides of boxes as well, because having a contrast of thicker and thinner timber means you're not just limited to what you can get at the shop. This is just the other side of what will become the base of the timber, just using the number 4 plane there. Just here I'm just squaring up the base a little bit. It's not going to be perfect, and I'm not really trying to fix every single problem here. I'm happy for some of the mistakes to carry over. Like, I'm fairly new to this, so it's something that I'm happy to just deal with. Certainly, as you're all aware of, sanding becomes a huge part of this, and the issue that I've got actually, I made the sides, I actually had some of the short sides have the grain going upwards and the long sides are going sideways. I would have actually aimed to use a card scraper there for a lot of the surface finishing, but wasn't to be, unfortunately. So just routing here with a pattern making bit, and you can see that it's just squaring off. I've just viced up, clamped up and the lid there, and just making sure it's nice and square with the midsection. And this is actually my first go with the new cordless router, which has been just amazing. Actually not having the cord there, as the name implies, makes such a monumental difference, where you're not always having the cord to work over. Just here I'm just chamfering the edges of the base to give it a little bit of a smoother edge, not trying to make it overly ornamental or anything like that. I just like to get it nicely fitted in. Off camera here I actually shorten up the base a little bit so that it matches a bit better, which you'll see in one of the future sections. This is a trick that I certainly didn't come up, there's no way I came up with this myself, but I have no idea where I actually saw it being done. Just for positioning the walls of the box onto the base, if you get some really fine gauge nails and just knock them in, probably 5mm, and then clip her off so you've got quite a sharp point on there. when you apply your glue, it enables you to get a essentially fixed position without the nails showing through from the far side. And the difference this makes in terms of positioning and getting it to sit still is huge. You can of course mix a little bit of salt in with your glue to build up some friction there, but for something like this where there's not a lot of leeway and it's kind of difficult to clamp without shifting it, this works out really well, I find. So yeah, those fine gauge nails and a pair of end clippers are just fantastic for it. So getting it roughly in position there, and then just taking my chisel mallet and just gently tapping it into place. And it does give you the option still to move if you have to, so it's not a permanent fix by any stretch of the imagination. So we're getting back into the sanding here, so we'll work through here because there's not really a lot to show. Just working my way up through the grits. I think I got as high as sort of 240 grit there, which is pretty much the standard. And I'm using water-based polyurethane as the finish here, just mainly so that the grain actually shows through. I, in retrospect, probably would have put a really light stain on it, but you'll see the finished product in a moment, and you can see what you think from there. But I think that's where it's always worth doing a couple of paint tests on some offcuts and seeing what you think. In this case, I just put water-based polyurethane straight on, and it's come up nicely. Just a couple of minor changes I would have made, but we'll do that for the next box.